Amelia Rowe from RMIT University. I'm one of the deputy co-chairs for ANZREG this year, and I will be your moderator for the first half of the day, so I'll see you through until lunchtime. Just a few housekeeping points before we get on to our first session today. I'll start with the acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge the Kumbameri clan of the Ugambe language group as the traditional custodians of this land. In the spirit of reconciliation, I would also like to acknowledge the Woiwurrung and Burrurung peoples of the Kulin language groups of the Kulin nations, among which I work and live. We'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present for their wisdom, teaching and cultural knowledge. Now the housekeeping. First of all, Wi-Fi access. So if anyone's still having any issues with Wi-Fi access, we still have the little how to access Wi-Fi flyers at the registration desk. There are PowerPoints for powering up your devices just to your left, to my right now. And also a reminder that these sessions are being recorded. This is particularly important if you're asking a question. Remember to hold the microphone nice and close to your mouth so that it can be heard and recorded. And I think that's all the introduction housekeeping, and we have 8 minutes before we're supposed to start the first session. So for the sake of the live stream people, you have another 8 minutes to talk among yourselves. now that you've all enjoyed your little 6-minute chat. Or was it an 8-minute chat? I can't remember. We have our first presenter for the day, Petrina Collingwood. Petrina has worked in library system roles for over 8 years in various universities in Melbourne and Brisbane. She's worked with ex libris's Alma, Primo, and more recently, Leganto. And she's worked at both RMIT University and CQ University. At RMIT, she was a part of the team implementing Alma and Primo in 2013. And for my own personal comments, I followed in her steps there. Petrina's current focus is on resolving electronic resource access problems, if you hadn't seen her posting to the list asking questions about them, and system administration for EasyProxy, Alma, Primo, and Leganto.
Good morning, everyone. As Amelia said, my name is Petrina Collingwood and I'm from CQ University. My presentation is called Primo is Broken, Can You Fix It? Converting Anecdotal Evidence into E-Resource Access Solutions. If anyone saw my title and abstract in the program, that's the old one. I've modified it slightly. We're getting that updated. So yeah, it's a slightly different title to what's in the program. Is that better? Okay. Okay. So Central Queensland University, the main campus is in Rockhampton, Queensland, and we have 11 campuses in Queensland and 4 in other states, including Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Adelaide, and several study centres and hubs around the country. We have over 30,000 students and 13,000 of those are study distance, so our priority is for providing services for online students basically. And we offer programs from vet through to higher degree research. We have 14 libraries in all the different campuses, with the main library at Rockhampton North, and we have a combined library and IT service. We implemented Alma and Primo in late 2016, and it was the fastest implementation probably on record. It was faster than the ex libris's fastest offering. And we implemented Leganto last year, and we also use EasyProxy and ADFS for authentication. So what we often heard from people was, Primo is broken, can you fix it? And the answer is yes and no. So in this presentation, I'm going to look at the problem, which was Primo links, and what caused them, the contributing factors, the approach I took to identify issues, errors and major issues, and we'll look at statistics of what was fixed, and a look at EBSCO in depth, and the common error of no full text available, and then I'll conclude. So the problem was starting in late 2016, we implemented Alma and Primo very quickly. And we received a lot of anecdotal reports of broken links in Primo during 2017, particularly for off-campus users trying to link to EBSCO. We had limited staff resources to optimise the use of Alma and Primo and to troubleshoot issues. So in 2018, my position was created, Digital Access Specialist, and my priority was to identify and fix electronic resource access problems. So just a disclaimer, this is not intended to make ex libris or EBSCO look bad. Unforeseen issues resulting from configuration choice by CQU is really the cause of all these problems. And both companies have gone above and beyond to help resolve the issues. So the contributing factors were our fast implementation, and our limited staff resources, and the fact that we moved EBSCOhost database authentication from EasyProxy to SSO. The approach I took was that I started off by seeking linking problem examples from library staff, and then I devised a plan for resolving issues, which included a systematic check of P2E records from Virtua, which was our old library system, and that was over 4,000 portfolios, and a check of all passes in Alma, particularly the EBSCO ones, and checking all the static URLs, particularly EBSCO ones, and a sample check of collection and portfolio service linking configuration, in particular whether EasyProxy was enabled or not, with an initial focus on EBSCO, and also checking the stanzas in the EasyProxy configuration file. So the cause of errors, here is a summary of all the reasons why links were broken, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Incorrect metadata in Primo Central Index, incorrectly configured passes in Alma, errors in electronic service linking configuration, which included generic static URLs for EBSCO resources and EasyProxy enabled for EBSCO resources when it shouldn't have been. Electronic resources not configured or configured incorrectly in EasyProxy. The limitations of the EBSCO link resolver, which requires a volume and issue number to work. Incorrect metadata in the target databases. Insufficient metadata in a PCI record. Incorrect coverage dates or volume issue numbers in Alma. Or links not proxied in Primo. This was the case for ProQuest dissertations and theses. And incorrect availability. So the Alma Holdings file was different to what Primo was showing up. So we set up a no-harvest pipe, or scheduled a no-harvest pipe once a week to correct any issues that arose like that. And the major problems that were found, EBSCOhost. So EBSCOhost links caused by issues with the Alma passes, static URLs, the EBSCO link resolver plugin, EBSCO's link resolver, and dynamic URL, which is something I'll talk about later. And another problem was EasyProxy was not enabled for some collections and portfolios where it should have been. Our EasyProxy config stanzas were not maintained for a very long time. And our standalone portfolios from Virtua, the static URLs were not maintained. And we often would see the no full text available error in Primo. Here are some statistics of what was fixed. I found 15,000 Canopy standalone portfolios that were not proxied. So that was easily solved by moving them into a collection. And approximately 2,500 other standalone portfolios were not proxied that came over from Virtua. I found 10 collections that were not proxied. 2 collections needed to be deactivated. One collection had 2019 portfolios in it that we didn't subscribe to. And 2 collections had incorrect parser parameters. And EasyProxy, the stanzas were reduced from 260 to 95, a 63% reduction. And I reduced the file by 700 lines, or 24%. And all 22 EBSCOhost collections had major issues. So the EBSCO saga. In late 2017, we moved EBSCOhost from EasyProxy to SSO. And this was so that students would no longer have to log in again to access their personalised account. So in the words of Cher, if I could turn back time, I would definitely turn back time. So the EBSCO link that is generated by Alma is a generic link like this, and it takes you, if you're off campus and not within the university IP range, it takes you to this login page, EBSCO login page, with a little error message. And the correct link that does work contains auth type equals SSO and cust ID equals S371 blah blah blah. So Alma was not including our CQU parameters. So the EBSCO host parser and parsers in Alma, by default they contained auth type equals cookie IP shib, which was okay for on campus because of IP, and that was for all 22 collections, but we needed auth type equals SSO, and that parameter is not configurable, so we opened a case and Ex Libris added the SSO field in the parser parameters. And I also corrected 140 standalone EBSCO portfolios that didn't have auth type or customer ID in it. And these had to be manually edited, and adding those two parameters into each URL. So at this point, we thought maybe the problem is solved, but the answer was no. Then we found the EBSCO link resolver plugin was an issue. So 14 of the EBSCO host collections use the EBSCO link resolver plugin. And this uses the EBSCO API to retrieve more accurate links which contain an ID instead of using an open URL. And there is an example of the URL with the AN ID. So these are far more accurate links, and if you switch off the plugin, you start getting a whole lot of errors. But the problem is they didn't contain any auth type or customer ID parameters in the URL, so they didn't work off campus. So we couldn't turn them off as a solution because then the links would break and then people would report them, and then if I reported it to EBSCO or Ex Libris, the solution would be, well, switch on the plugin again. So had to leave it on. The next one, oh no, this is more of the same. So this link resolver plugin is an integration profile, and you can see that it contains the API user ID for CQU, but it does not contain a username or password to access the CQU account. So what Alma does is it just uses the generic EBSCO API, so the URLs that are returned do not contain institution-specific parameters. Ex Libris wouldn't fix this for us. They recommended the ideas exchange, and I figured if we're the only ones with this problem, I doubt it's going to go through. So I kept looking for new solutions. And then I found the EBSCO link resolver problem. So when you don't use the plugin, an open URL is generated, and this is a problem for newspapers which don't have a volume and issue number. So this one is an example of the Sydney Morning Herald. It has no volume and issue number, and it always takes you to this error page. I believe we saw this error page yesterday on the screen when Third Iron did their presentation, one of the many problems of link resolvers. So EBSCO said they had no plans to fix it and offered a workaround. And the workaround was the dynamic URL. I don't know if any of you have tried to use this in Alma, but it's an alternative to using parsers. So yeah, you just select dynamic URL and you put in your own URL syntax, and it looks like this. Well, this is an example of some code that you can put in, and this covers most situations. So 4 if statements, and first of all it looks for the open URL parameter article title. So if it contains an article title, it will generate this format of URL, where it includes the journal title, the year, and article title as a bQuery search. And then if there's no article title, it moves on to the next one. Does it have a year and a book title? If it does, it generates a search with those 2 fields. And if not, does it have a book title? So if it does a book title search only. And then if none of those are in the record, it just does a journal title search. So here is an example of a URL that is generated for a particular article. It's a bQuery search, and what it does, it puts that sort of advanced search type thing in one of the search boxes, one of the keyword boxes in EBSCO, and does a search. So if only one result is returned, it automatically opens the full record in EBSCO, so it's as though you're using an open URL to link to an article rather than just doing a search. But if there's more than one article returned, then it will show the list of results. But that's pretty unusual. But we found problems with it. So unfortunately, the pub date field comes from the 264C field, which can contain other characters like square brackets and copyright symbol. I've been told that that's probably the wrong field, and I could probably report that and get that fixed, but I have moved on from dynamic URLs at this stage, so I'm not following it up at this point. But EBSCO did say that they could handle that and sort of send the URL to a different server where they could run a script and clean up the data before it's sent on to the EBSCO host database. So they could handle that. But the URL encode function was full of bugs. There's problems with diacritics. The ampersand is not encoded. Curly quotations, hyphens, and EN dashes are not handled well. And if there are too many brackets, it breaks and just stops, just cuts off at a certain point. So Ex Libris has this in development. I don't know when that will be fixed. And the other issue with dynamic URLs is that it can't access the JKey parameter. So in examples where the title of the publication in Alma, like in the portfolio, like for this Central Coast newspaper, contains place names and country names and state names and everything, that's not what's in EBSCO, that's just what's in Alma, so they're not going to match by keyword search. And you can see that spaces are missing as well, and that's because there's too many brackets, and that's what the dynamic URL function does, one of the bugs anyway. So we really need the JKey parameter to accurately link to newspapers and other titles that can't be found by keyword search. So we decided not to pursue that one. But then a few months later, I had a surprise when I found that EBSCO Newspaper Source Plus in Alma, the parser had been changed, and it was using dynamic URL for articles, but still using the JKey parameter for journal titles. So that's the best of both worlds, except that the URL encode function still has bugs. So I was somewhat pleased at that solution, but it's still not a solution because of the bugs. So at one point it was just like another day, another EBSCO problem. It was just kept on going and going and going. So we moved from Easy Proxy to SSO to fix the problem, but it caused more problems, and then the solutions to those problems caused even more problems. So what solutions do we have? Okay, we could go back to Easy Proxy, which is an ideal because we've got a whole lot of EBSCO links in an our MBA course in Moodle, not to mention just our regular courses in Moodle. We could implement Open Athens, which is something we're considering, but maybe not till next year or the year after. And that would just be as hard as, or harder than going back to Easy Proxy. We could unsubscribe from all EBSCO databases, which is tempting but probably not possible. We can do nothing, which is what we're doing now. We have an FAQ to help students log in correctly when they're off campus, and then they're able to, then it stores a cookie and they're able to access articles. We could turn off the EBSCO link resolver plugin in Alma and use dynamic URLs instead, but not until the URL encode bugs are fixed. And the latest solution I've thought of is that we could use, we'd ask Ex Libris to do the same with all of our collections, where it uses the dynamic URL for the articles and the JKey, the parser for the JKey journal titles. That would be ideal, but only once URL encode bugs are fixed. So this is where we're at this point. And finally, well, not quite finally, but the no full text error in Primo, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Here are the reasons why it occurs. To save a bit of time, I won't read them, but the last one, the view it links querying only one ISBN. So in PNX record, you might have 3 ISBNs. The Alma record, in this case, has 2. One of those in both matches, so what you end up with is the full text available status in Primo. And if you're not familiar with getting the debug code, you can get it by right-clicking on the Note Full Text box there, the white one, and clicking View Frame Source, and what you see is this. So you can see that the URL that is used to retrieve links from Alma, it only has one ISBN. So if it can't find that ISBN in Alma, it returns no full text available. So the other ISBN that we saw in the slide before last, the one ending in 107, that would have matched if it had been added to the URL, but it wasn't, so it didn't. Ex Libris said that's in pending development. So hopefully they can fix it. I don't know. We'll see. So in conclusion, the Primo linking issues have been demystified mostly, and we've been able to educate library staff about linking issues and why they happen. We've resolved many issues, such as the Alma electronic service configuration, and added Easy Proxy to the Primo back office for Primo links. And Easy Proxy configuration was fully updated. And we're still working on issues like with EBSCO. We've got the FAQ workaround, and we've got, well, we're just waiting on things to be resolved at the EBSCO end. The Ex Libris end. But they are in development, which is encouraging. Thank you, that's all. Do you have any questions?
Hi, I'm Erin from University of Western Australia. I'm pretty sure at some point I've emailed you about the EBSCO link resolver, because we also have the same issue, and EBSCO have given us a custom dynamic URL. So it's kind of become a bit of a bugbear of mine, the fact that EBSCO aren't willing to fix the issues, would you consider, I mean, obviously it's affecting multiple sites and EBSCO is such an expensive resource. If multiple universities got together to actually lobby EBSCO, you know, do you think this is something that would actually make any difference, you know, in terms of, because it is actually getting to the point where we're considering putting EBSCO links at the bottom of the services list just because they are so problematic and causing us so many issues. That's more of a suggestion rather than a question.
Yeah, we've actually done that already.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay. I've been on parental leave for a year, so I was kind of hoping things would be better when I came back, but no.
Yeah, well, if enough people get together and lobby them, then I'm sure they are very, very responsive, but I guess depends on their reasons why not. I can't quite remember.
Yeah. I've actually found them quite unresponsive. They're not actually, to actually get them to even look at it, to give us the dynamic custom link took maybe 6 months of me continually complaining about links, but they just kept fixing one at a time rather than actually addressing the issue. But I'll stop whinging.
Behind you.
Alan Cockrell, James Cook University. I was just wondering if you can pat yourself on the back. When your position was created, have you done a comparison of how many Primo is broken, can you fix it, requests you're getting before and after? It's like
part of my mandate, my job, or what I was told to do was to quantify that, was to quantify how many links are broken, and how do you do that? I did ask the question on the lists, does anyone know how to quantify it, and the answer was no.
So when someone makes that request, so you're not a LibAnswers user, for example, you don't use, sorry, I'm not making that very loud. When someone says, reports to you that something's broken, is that recorded in anything at all, or is it?
Well, we have a system, the Cherwell system for logging jobs like that. I have asked from time to time for some statistics, and I did get some, but not enough. It's hard to you'd have to actually go through and see which one was about what to do that.
Yeah.
They're not classified in any way as this was a Primo specific one. This was, I don't know. I did, make a big spreadsheet recording all the problems that I could find before fixing it. I guess I haven't followed up on trying to find out how many were fixed, but I guess it's just more a general feel that we're getting less problems reported, or maybe people just aren't reporting them anymore because I keep saying it's a known issue. And so they know it's an issue and they don't bother reporting. Yeah, it would be good to know more specifically.
With the link testing, did you do that manually or just based on like reports of problems that had come in, or were you able to find any kind of automated tools to find out how extensive the problem was? Because I think you did ask the list about it but didn't get much response.
Well, we had to set up a virtual machine to test off campus. Because on campus you can't see the problems with logging into EBSCO when you're off campus. So we did that and tested a lot of things that way. And then I was hoping to, I didn't put it in my presentation because it wasn't enough time, but that analytics report that you created about the no full text error, except that you were able to use a Firefox macro to test the links automatically. Sorry? Okay, I would like to know about that. But yeah, I couldn't get the same plug-in to do that job, or macro to do that job. Didn't have time anyway. But yeah, that's a good idea. And Amelia should share it with us on the list. Okay, there you go.
Disappear. Thank you from the ANZREG committee. Next up, we have Rachel and Megan from Monash University, who wrote some very long bios, but then said to me this morning that they've got a long presentation and I don't need to go into it, so I won't go into it, and maybe you can introduce yourselves quickly before you kick off.
Hi, so my name's Megan. I'm the Applications Librarian at Monash University, and Rachel is one of our Applications Administrators. Our presentation today is a review of a Primo UX project that we undertook over about 2 years, and we're going to talk about the process that we followed and our findings from this review. So, at Monash University, we were... Sorry, can I have a... Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay. At Monash University, we run a professionally managed library user survey every 2 years with 7 other Australian universities. And one of the questions that we ask users in this survey is to rank a list of the library services that are most important to least important. And in 2017, library users listed the following library services as most important. So you can see the 4th most important service listed is library search facility that enable me to find library resources quickly. That's interpreted as Primo. And the 9th most important issue, when I'm away from campus, I can access the library resources and services that I need, is both the library proxy servers and Primo. And while it's encouraging to know that users value resource discovery, when users completed the free text section of the survey, they made comments about Primo like these. So while UX research tells us that most feedback is either heavily positive, has either a heavy positive or negative bias, as only users who have strong feelings about an issue will spend the time to provide feedback, in 2017 we received 5 favourable comments about Primo and 61 unfavourable comments. And equally, many of the issues described in the feedback related to Primo design and system functionality, which we had limited capacity to change. As Primo administrators, we can at most configure predefined settings or tweak Primo session design and layout. It's more difficult to address issues like the number of screens a user needs to navigate to get from the search results screen to another, or to the PDF link or physical item availability statement, although we have added a couple of plugins that have helped with this, and Rachel will talk about those. And every customisation we develop, as everybody knows, builds in a service overhead. So the overhead has to be repaid each time we run the upgrade in the people hours spent reapplying custom scripts, in configuration choices and in regression testing. We think this highlights the underlying tension for Primo administrators, which we recognised when we planned the approach we would take to this project. One of our goals was to limit our development to changes that would provide a tangible return on investment. And to do this, and because a full Primo UX project is a major project that impacts on a broad range of library users and staff, we ran the project using a formal project management approach. So the plan included strategic objectives, project objectives, and success factors. Our project plan included a project implementation map and criteria against which we could evaluate the project's success and identify future potential improvements. Out of the project plan, we developed project milestones, which recognised both the available project resources and the ongoing application management commitment. Each of these stages has an estimated start and finish date and allocated staff resources. So based on this planning, we started the project by collecting data that described our users' past behaviours in Primo. We saw this as a way to identify trends and make recommendations for the next stage of the project, which was the user experience testing. We started our data collection by sourcing a year's worth of Primo usage logs from our Primo server, Primo and Alma Analytics and Google Analytics. We ingested our Primo logs into Splunk to organise and analyse them, and compared the results with the Primo, Alma and Google Analytics reports for verification. We developed a large research data set, and you can access that data set using this URL or QR code, and we use this intelligence as a starting point to answer questions like, how do users search in Primo? Where do they start their searches? Which screen elements do they use most heavily and which do they ignore? And what highlights can we glean from understanding how users structure their searches? We reviewed and organised this data by categorising them into functional themes, which allowed us to identify trends and make development recommendations. The questions we asked were, how do users start a search? Do they narrow their search results? Do they broaden their search results? Do they personalise their search results? And do they save their search results or user information for reuse? What we found was 90% of users start searching in the basic search screen, and 98.5% of searches were run in the default All Resources search scope. When we started this project, we had 4 search scopes, one called All Resources, which was a blended scope, a library collections and rare books, which was a local scope, online articles, a PCI deep search scope, and popular databases, which was a remote scope. In early analysis of this data, the project team queried if users were making a conscious decision to select a search scope or if they were simply unaware of the scope choices available to them. And this question was noted for further investigation. User sign-in functions. We identified that Primo sign-in was a critical system function, and it was disappointing to see that only 15% of our users signed into Primo during a session. The project team identified the importance of making this option more visible to users, both through system redesign and user education. Users can narrow their searches by linking to resource availability information, and 95% of Primo search actions were resource availability seeking actions. And these were split by 51% of click on availability statement, and 45% of those actions were to click on the view it links. This data is about 2 years old, and I assume that if we reran this data set, we'd probably get a flip in that, and we'd have more people linking to the electronic than the physical. Users can also narrow their search results by filtering brief search results to using options like Primo search actions, refining actions applied to results in the brief results screen. And of these, 56% of the search refining actions were filtered by facets, and 42% of the actions were selecting the next page link. 5% of Primo search actions were filtering by facets, and most users, well 45%, used the top level facet option that includes peer-reviewed articles, full text online and available in the library. 5% of Primo search actions were item detail refining actions, which includes accessing the Details tab, which was 80% of the actions, the Review tab and the Virtual Browse tab. And 0.35% of Primo search actions were sort by actions, which included sorting by descending date, by rank, by popularity, by ascending date or by title. Users selected citations and recommended actions about 0.1% of their activity in Primo. So from this data, the project team were able to map typical user search behaviour in Primo. Typically, when our users search in Primo, they use the default sort by option, they do not use citations or recommender, and they do not display reviews. So this suggested that in UX testing, we could reduce the number of facets available to users in the brief results screen to the top 5 in the language facet. Sorry. We could remove all sort by options except sort by ascending and descending dates, which were relevant for special collections, and we could remove the recommendations tab from the item detail screen. We felt these changes would have minimum impact on the user activity in Primo and would simplify the screen. In Primo, users have the option to discover resources serendipitously through browse searching and embedded links. And from the available data, they don't appear to use these options at all. The project team agreed that few users would experience a loss of functionality if we removed the browse search link from the basic and advanced search screens in UX testing. And we also looked at the BX recommender, which, because it's a separate subscription service, we wanted to investigate to see if it's worth continuing. We agreed to move the BX link to a more visible location during user testing to evaluate if this would improve user take-up. The data available from Primo Analytics for My Account usage is problematic because by default the My Account screen opens in the loans screen. But loans usage is only recorded if the user accesses the loans list directly. The project team felt that this biased the metrics recorded for the number of times users access their loan information in Primo. However, we felt more confident about the data that described usage tags usage, reviews usage, and the usage of personalised results profile option. And we determined if we disabled these functions, there would be minimum impact on users. In reusing search results, we included exported citations, save sessions and save queries, add eShelf in brief search results, details, view it and get it screens, access resources via eShelf and deep link and permalink. Our evaluation of these services was there was very little take-up of these features, but none of them were visible on the landing page or in the brief results screen. They're integrated Primo functions and it would require significant effort to remove them, so we decided to leave them as they are. We did identify a potential benefit for users if they were more aware of these services and noted that it may be worth developing some research skills resources to promote them. An analysis of how users structure their searches in Primo shows that 44% of users' searches are 2 to 4 words long. Most searches are either under 7 words long, and that was about 69% of searches, or include more than 50 words, and that was about 14% searches. The search terms used in most searches were fairly simple. For example, marketing mix was the most commonly occurring search term and it occurred 24% of the time in our top 20 searches. Users get no search results for about 1.13% of all searches. So this data suggested that our users have 2 primary search strategies. They either enter a few words into Primo to start a search, or they copy and paste their research topic or a full citation into Primo. The project team did recognise that there was an outlier group of about 9% of users who didn't fit this model. Unlike the prevailing 91% of users, this 9% of users started their searches in advanced search, applied both pre- and post-search filtering. However, the project team prioritised the needs of the 91% of unsophisticated users over the 9%, both because of the size of each group and because in the continuum of discovery applications that the library maintains, we see Primo primarily as an undergraduate discovery service, as illustrated in the next diagram. So at the end of the first stage of the project, we had collected and analysed a large data set. From this data, we had proposed some Primo search features we wanted to highlight through screen design and configuration, and other features we wanted to remove. In the next stage of the project, we would develop 2 test environments to evaluate users' responses to these potential design changes. And Rachel will now outline how we ran this testing and what we discovered about our users.
Oh, you can put it there for now. So let me first describe to you our Primo environment. We've been on Primo Voyager since June 2010, and then in September 2013, we have moved to Primo Alma. We have 3 Alma institutions and only 1 Primo instance, and we manage 3 different views on this instance. We are running PDS using SAML Okta at this stage, and those are the other statistics that we have. So we had to consider all of this when we planned the UX testing. So Megan provided you a bit of an overview. So these are the steps that we actually went through, and we did 2 rounds of this user testing. We had the statistics that we captured from Primo Analytics, and Splunk and other analytics that we have. And that's how we identify the screen elements and that were frequently used by our users. We then designed 2 different views, one which slightly mimicked the classic view, and then the second view was something that was a stripped down version which had lesser facets and modified scopes. We then gathered volunteers from different faculties in various cohorts so that we can actually provide them different test scenarios for each view, and we're asked to think aloud during the process. We also asked 2 research and learning staff and the UX expert during the session. We provided pre-testing and post-testing surveys to the users, and the session was run for about 1.5 hours. We ran a workshop with the observers to summarize the data and make recommendations. Part of the recommendation were classified into 3 themes: user education, system changes, and system limitations. Any cosmetic changes that were easy to implement went through as input for the second round of testing, and we went through the same process again. So we conducted the testing, the first round of testing, early May 2018, and we had 10 testers for round 1. So they say in a standard UX study, it's okay to just have like a maximum of 6, but we went overboard. So we went and took on an extra 4. That was just for round 1, and then for round 2, we had the same sort of number. We ran it across 2 branches, and one was at the Innovation Studio and another one at the Library Teaching Room. So the Innovation Studio is a purpose-built space that helps students and staff collaborate to improve user experience, advance innovation in design for university-wide applications. They have access to a suite of UX tools, devices, and testers. And because Primo is used by all the students across the university, we had a good pickup from eSolutions in support. The session was also projected onto the big screen so that the observers wouldn't be hovering behind the tester. And the session was recorded using Moray so that we can actually go back to the session. Now, we gathered volunteers from different cohorts, and we had to make sure that different faculties were represented because they have different searching approaches and requirements. We also had different year levels and representation from local and international students. We also made sure that we had undergraduates, postgraduates, and academic representation. So we had about 20. Now, if you want to have access to our testing kits, you can access it through this URL or the QR code, and you can see what testing scenarios we've used, and also the pre-testing questionnaires and post-testing surveys that we've used. Now, these were all based on some of the various papers we've come across, including ones from Ex Libris, La Trobe, Flinders Uni, and others available online. Now, we had lots of questions in the pre-testing survey, and one of the ones that we'd like to share was where they actually started off their searching for online materials. Now, we had a distinction between general study topics and authoritative information. So when we asked them where they search for authoritative information, can you guess where they actually start off with? Google, yeah? So their first approach was actually going Google Scholar. So they knew that for peer-reviewed stuff, they would go to Google Scholar. Or if they were from a faculty or specific faculty, they know what database they had to go to. And once they've actually hit a paywall, that's the only time they go to Primo to access the material. And if they still hit a roadblock or couldn't find that article, they'd go back and find another database. So from one view, the view 1 was the classic looking view, versus the second one, which was the simplified and stripped down version. We asked them which of the 2 views they actually preferred. Now, they preferred the simplified view, and 50% strongly agreed that view 2 was easier to find resources in. And out of the 14 screen elements we highlighted in the survey, the top 3 most useful elements for them was the advanced search, favorites, and citation linked to styles. And what was interesting was these were their responses in the survey, but it wasn't actually what they were presenting when we were observing them. So there was that sort of conflict. Another question we asked them on the second round of testing was what attributes of the screen they really liked. And they really liked the grouping of the titles because the results were just compressed. They also liked the availability information being displayed there because they just wanted everything on one. The lesser the clicks, the better. And their favorite was the browsing download now feature. And a few of them actually commented saying, why can't you just have this on all the articles there? So this is just a quick overview on the comparison of the quantitative data that Megan presented and the observation data that we had, and also the recommendations that the research and learning staff presented. So in terms of sign-in, 15% of users only sign in. And in the observation, they also didn't sign in. They will only be signing in once they needed to actually check loans or place holds. So we recommended that, either enable auto-login, which we're still working on with Ex-Libris, but educate users in the benefits of signing in. So the same applies for the basic search. They only use the default searching approach. So we've modified the main menu and also the embedded search box on the library homepage. Same thing with the scopes. They don't change the scope as much as they need to. And the labels that we use were also unclear. So we've changed and renamed the scopings and enabled autocomplete. Facet was also limited in terms of use. So we've stripped down and simplified the facet list to the top 5 to 6 facets. In terms of sorting, they also don't sort or change the sorting. And so in terms of education, we have to make sure that we educate them on the benefits of sorting. We've also changed where the sort by option because it's not visible under the facets list, so we made it more visible. We've presented locations information next to the availability, and again, educate users in signing in. When we showed them the save queries, they weren't familiar with this. So this is another thing that we need to educate users about. I won't show this now, but maybe during the break I can. But this is just feedback from one of our research and learning staff about the experience. So from our 8-year-old classic new UI, we presented the new UI. And in the process of implementation, we put it in beta in December and January, put it in production in Feb, run some road shows so that all the library staff across the different branches were also aware of the changes that we're doing and why we made the change. We also wanted to collect post-implementation feedback, so we implemented Hotjar in the process, and we've added this into the new UI as a pop-up window, and this is where they can actually provide their feedback and create screenshots. Now, Hotjar has limitations, and because it is web tracking, so I know there would be issues about privacy. So they have a full commitment to GDPR, but if you'd like to implement it and you've got concerns, it's better that you actually contact them as well. So this was part of the feedback that we collected. Out of the 473 responses, they said 2.3. I guess based on experience, you'd only complain if you're really passionate about something, but in terms of positive stuff, you'll just ignore things. So this is not a clear indication of their actual feelings, but it's good to know on what's going on from the user's perspective. One thing I really like about Hotjar was the heat maps. So this is just mouse movements on the search. So you can see that on the facets list, they're using the top level facets. In terms of item display, so you can see that we've simplified the actual save as options, and that's the EndNote to desktop and citation link, and also the view it tab links. This is the favorites page, so they really like the checkbox and the labels. That's where they're moving their mouses. And citation linker, they normally use the article title, the journal title, and the DOI. So when we manually classified the themes, it was focused on searching issues, view it, and get it access. And this was just a manual classification that we did. And most of those that we've classified as user education were related to, I can't place a hold, I don't know where document delivery is. So it's really more, all those simple things, but it's really user education. So we provided peer learning sessions with research and learning staff so that it would equip them for the next semesters in terms of tutorials and all.
So our reflections will be very short. We have a lot of expectations of Primo, and these are some of them. And we know from our UX testing that this isn't always our users' experience in Primo. So while we think that this project has made significant improvements in Primo, there's still a gap between what we can deliver and what users expect. And we think we can address these by doing a lot more user consultation, not assuming that we know what users want, but asking them specifically. And we also recognise that we're working within the constraints of the functionality and configuration choices available in Primo. And we remind ourselves that Primo development is evolutionary, and by working with the Primo user community, we can influence this development. And I think later in the day, Amelia's going to do a session on how we can do that collectively as a group, and I think that's really important. And it is vital, because we know that when Primo doesn't meet our users' needs, they will just look at alternative discovery solutions. Thank you. Sounds good.
Among your findings, you mentioned user education as one of the things that you feel you need to do, I guess, more of. And you did mention, I think, peer mentoring is one of the tools you're using for user education. But a lot of the time you need to educate users on the page, at the point of need kind of thing. And have you done anything to add or change sort of help documentation and how you deliver that help documentation to the user on library search?
We are in the process of evaluating that. We are redesigning the actual search libguide or the Primo libguide, so we still haven't published that. At the same time, we are also looking at opportunities of maybe creating a chatbot. Maybe that's another thing that we can explore.
And I suppose the discussion that we've had with research and learning is very much that being able to intervene at point of need is so difficult to do in a face-to-face situation. Obviously, we're not going to do that with every student in the university. And so it needs to be managed in a way that the resources are available within the application, and that's where the chatbot sounds a good solution to us.
I think the other opportunity is for some subject librarians, they're actually embedded in the faculty, so they even run sessions during the actual lecture. So it depends on the actual academic, whether they're invited and if it's sort of relevant for that particular topic for them to be involved.
Thank you for your presentation. What exactly, I just know, after the user testing, I just quickly heard that you reduced your facet to 5 for a certain filter, and did you take out browse? It was going pretty fast. So what are the major customization change? And also the second thought was, not all tabs or functionality are of equal value. For example, certain things, even though the usage is quite low, but the functionality may be unique. And how do you evaluate and making that choices? Thank you.
So when we looked at the redesign of our Primo environment, one of our initial assumptions was that there's so much functionality plugged into the front page and to the brief results screen that is very confusing for users, and that was reinforced in the UX testing. We found that for most of our respondents in the UX sessions, they didn't even see the facets. Like, we gave them specific test questions to work through, which relied on them using the facet to resolve the issue. And they would sit there moving their mouse backwards and forwards across the screen with the facet, you know, sitting there saying language facet or whichever facet it was that was useful, and they'd give up, half of them halfway through. So we know that although there's a potential for every function in Primo to be useful, in reality, for the user, very little of that potential is realised. So one of our assumptions was that we would reduce significantly the functionality on the screen. Did you want to add to that?
I think you mentioned the browse. So there were a few library staff who were using that. So instead of it being in the main menu and to add clutter to the page and confusion to actual users, students, we've actually put it in a quick link so that they can even access it still. So it's moving it around to avoid confusion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I didn't actually check the room to see if there were any more questions, but we have hit morning tea time, so I thought I'd jump in, and you can always grab them at morning tea. I'd like to point out that today's morning tea has been sponsored by Library Help, and I think that's spelled H3LP. And I believe they have a stand at the back there too if you want to have a chat and find out more about that. We'll be back at 11 o'clock.